Hello, ako si Jodesz Gavilan. Kayo ay nanonood ng bagong episode ng Newsbreak Beyond the Stories kung saan hihimayin natin ang mga maiinit at mahalagang isyu sa Pilipinas. Sa episode na to, pag-uusapan natin ang investigasyon ng Department of Justice sa mga patayan sa ilalim ng War on Drugs ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Lagpas 1 taon na rin nag-iimbestiga ang panel na ito. Ngunit wala pa rin sila na isasampang kaso laban sa mga pulis na umunay pumatay ng mga suspect. Hindi pa rin tumitigil ang madugong kampanya at patuloy ang pagtaas ng bilang ng mga napatay. Hindi natin alam kung gaano karami na ang total pero nasa mga, at least the last time I check ay 6,000 plus na ng mga namatay ever since the drug war began in 2016. Saan patungo ang investigasyon na to ng drug war panel? Para talaga ba ito sa mga biktima o para lang may maipakita na may ginagawa sila tungkol sa issue ng drug war killings sa bansa? Kasama ko ngayon na Rappler Justice reporter na si Lian Buan para talakayin ng isyong ito. Hi Lian, salamat sa pagsama ngayong araw na to.
You're welcome, Jodesz. Always a pleasure to talk about the Justice Beat.
Yeah. And I'm also very excited to ask you questions kasi ang dami-dami na nangyayari. Hindi natin alam kung saan na sumasangay yung gulo na to. So, bago tayo magsimula, I would like to remind our audience na pwede silang magtanong. If you have any question or opinion on the issue that we're talking about, pwede silang mag-comment sa comment section natin sa Facebook, sa YouTube, or sa Twitter. At we'll try our best to answer and to tackle your comment as the program progresses. So, begin na tayo kasi ang dami kong tanong at ang dami nating tatalakayin ngayong gabi na to. So, Lian, maaari mo bang ipaalala sa atin or bigyan mo kami ng refresher course na short lang kung ano nga ba yung root nitong interagency panel na pinangungunahan ng DOJ? Kailan ito nagsimula at ano yung nag-prompt sa creation nito?
Bago yung Jodesz, siguro baseline data muna para sa mga nanonood at nakikinig. So, by estimates of the human rights community, 20,000 overall yung napapatay sa war on drugs. Kasama dyan yung mga pinapatay ng mga vigilante. And by 2018, by mid-2018, alam na ng gobyerno na sa 20,000 na yon, 5,000 doon ay napatay sa police anti-drug operation. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga nanlaban. Legitimate police operation, pero nanlaban umano yung suspect. And there were 5,000 of those cases killed. In 2019, we came out with a story asking them, how many of these cases have you investigated? At least yung sa 5,000. Kasi kapag vigilante killing, medyo mahirap yung imbestigahan because we will assume that that's riding in tandem, hindi alam yung suspect. So you really cannot begin to investigate kung hindi mo alam kung saan ka magsisimula. But the 5,000 deaths at the time na nangyari sa police anti-drug operation, nandiyan yung suspect mo. We call it suspect, although the police would say there's a presumption of regularity, but it would be easy to investigate because you have the police and supposedly you would have pre-op reports, operation reports, and post-op reports. And when we came out with that report in January 2019, nasa 76 pa lang ang naiimbestigahan ng DOJ. So we started asking that question even in 2018 na how many of these deaths are you investigating? And for such a long time, there was no answer to that. Until June 2020, humarap si Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara sa United Nations Human Rights Council at sinabi niya na bumuo ng isang interagency panel na pangungunahan ng DOJ para magkaroon ng drug war review of the deaths that happened in police anti-drug operation. And while that's a good sign, the timing was also suspect. Kasi by that time, hinihintay na kung ano ang magiging move ng International Criminal Court. At yung speech ni Justice Secretary Guevara sa UNHRC ay sinasabi niya, iimbestigahan na namin. So hindi na kailangan ng iba pang international investigation like the ICC. But the question from then until now is, why wait for June 2020 to open that kind of a review when in 2018 pa lang, you knew that as much as 5,000 have already been killed. Kaya pinagbibintangan sila na, baka ano nyo lang yan. It's a way to mislead the international community na you're doing something when in fact, this was just a reactive action dahil iniimbestigahan na or mag-iimbestiga na ang ICC. I'm sorry that's long, but that's the baseline information.
Yeah, so ang dami nga criticisms nung nilaunch na tong panel na to, sinasabi nga talaga na they only did this to shield the government from international scrutiny. Pero of course, diba, if doon pa lang na-criticize silang gano'n na doon, pwede lang i-prove wrong yung mga naysayers nila na they should do their jobs. Pero 1 year into this drug panel na to, ano yung mga significant na nangyari na it seems to be important or crucial, at least on the surface level, kasi hindi natin alam kung ano yung meat and kasi dito hindi natin alam kung ano yung laman. Pero tingin mo ano yung mga significant na nangyari na in relation to this panel?
The first significant development, alam mo, nung sinimulan nila to noong June 2020, they promised they would come out with a report by November 2020, pero nagka-pandemic, so na-delay. By February 2021, in a surprise announcement again by Secretary Guevara to the UNHRC, he reported that half of the cases they examined, it showed lapse of protocol on the part of policemen. So on the face of that announcement alone, mukhang the DOJ has dented President Duterte's drug war. Pero after follow-ups in the following weeks and months after that announcement in February, we would find out na ang na-review lang ng DOJ panel, which promised to review 5,000, ang na-review lang nila 300. So kung half of those cases violated or there were lapses of protocol, that would be around 150. And hindi nga ganun tayo ka-certain how many cases talaga kasi hindi siya directly masagot. It's a piecemeal information that we're getting through incremental information from the DOJ. So that was the first development. The second development happened weeks ago. Before that, we will remember that there was a change of leadership sa PNP. So the Bolsinas was out and Guillermo Eleazar was in. And after General Eleazar became chief of the PNP, nag-usap sila ni Secretary Guevara, and the product of that meeting was finally ibibigay ng PNP ang case record nila sa DOJ. One thing about that, you have to question why it would take a leadership change for PNP to open its case records to DOJ. Pareho silang executive agency. Forever silang close to CHR, but siguro you would understand because CHR is a constitutional commission. Kumbaga independent sila, hindi sila so-and-so kakampe ng executive. But DOJ and PNP belong to the executive agency, so you would question why it took that long for PNP to open its case folders to DOJ. So the first promise was everything, all its case records, it would open to the DOJ. And then President Duterte goes on a speech late at night and said, I am concerned for the national security if you open those case folders. And just like that, in one speech, they trimmed it down to 52. So from 6,000 mahigit na namatay, kasi by then, around 6,000 to 7,000 na ang namamatay sa legitimate police operations. So from 6 to 7,000, naging 52 na lang yung ibibigay ng PNP. So binigay nila ang case folders ng 52 cases of deaths to the DOJ. And weeks ago, this is the third development. Ang significance pala ng 52 ay the PNP Internal Affairs Service, the PNP IAS, the Internal Investigation Service of the PNP, has found administrative liability on the part of those policemen. So actually dapat 61 siya, pero yung 8 doon ay may appeal. So 52 na lang. So nung 52 binigay sa DOJ, and so weeks ago na-report ni Secretary Guevara na in those 52 cases they have found potential criminal liability. But I think you would ask this question also, Jodesz, but instead of filing the complaints, not even filing the charges in courts, filing the complaints before the prosecution service, hindi pa yun, ipapa-imbestiga nila ulit another case build up by the NBI, which is why human rights lawyers, even the CHR's word is superfluous, napaka-superfluous naman ng process, protracted to some human rights lawyers, dragging to victims.
So I will ask you about NBI investigation and your latest moves in a bit, no? Pero siguro in general, Lian, can you give us siguro a few rundown kung ano yung mga red flags na nakikita mo sa investigasyon ng drug war panel na tingin mo goes against the very essence of this drug war panel, which is to investigate cases, to hold police accountable. Ano yung mga instances na you felt very off sa mga nangyayari within the panel na nalalaman nyo, of course, kasi I know na medyo very hindi sila transparent sa ginagawa nila?
You mentioned it, Jodesz. Number one red flag is transparency. The first report in February, we didn't even know kung ilan yung kasong in-examine nila sa preliminary report nila. As I said, it was an incremental information. Yung makukuha mo lang unti-unti and you have to get it by extracting it from them. It's not really given to you on a silver platter, which dapat binibigay sa'yo because it's the public's right to know. So, number one is transparency. We haven't seen the full report. They're saying it's confidential memo to the president. Again, in transparency, we would expect at least CHR to know. Kasi CHR has been on the forefront of the investigation since 2016. And sabi nga sa atin ni Commissioner Karen Gomez Dumpit, if they have the list, if they have full access to those data, at least kahit hindi sila ang mag-establish ng criminal liability, they can do some findings that would seek to prevent killings. Kasi pag tinignan nila yung data at makikita nila na, uy, itong estasyon na to, lagi na lang nasasangkot. Or, uy, itong pulis na to, lagi na lang nasasangkot. Uy, parang may pattern na ganito yung laging nangyayari. If they can see that, then they could push for policies, diba? Pero the fact that CHR doesn't have access to any of those two reports, the public also doesn't have access to any of those two reports. They don't have access to raw data. And this is the biggest red flag, aside from transparency. It seems to me that the DOJ name-dropped the CHR but didn't keep its promise. Kasi nung nag-speech si Secretary Guevara nung June 2020 sa UNCHR, ang promise niya ay the unhampered functioning of the Philippine Commission on Human Rights underpins our strong position that there is no need for the ICC. So, ni-name drop nila na parang, uy, meron naman kaming CHR dito. Kaya na namin to. Wala na dapat international investigation. But CHR has not been engaged in any extent, in any capacity. And that's CHR saying it. I just talked to them last week. Sinabi nila wala talaga silang engagement dito sa drug war review panel. So, the promise has been broken, or at least has not been fulfilled 1 year after the launch, the review was open.
And I remember just last week nagbigay na update si UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet regarding sa technical assistance given to the Philippines in relation to the resolution adopted last year. Talagang explicitly sinabi niya na una, the government, the DOJ, should publicize yung findings nila. And pangalawa, dapat i-engage na closely coordinate sila sa Commission on Human Rights and other stakeholders, whether it's the human rights groups, the victims groups, para ma-ensure na yung accountability process ay victim-centered. So parang nakita natin na sinasabi ng DOJ na ganito na they will include CHR sa UN. Pero it seems na the UN Rights Chief mismo, nakita niya yung parang, nakikita niya yung parang smoke screen na to na parang, hindi kayo nagsasabi ng totoo, but hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin kayo ini-engage yung CHR. And I'm curious to know, of course, baka hindi mo rin, hindi kasi nasagot yung question na to, kung ano yung reaction ng DOJ sa statement ni Bachelet sa ganyan na inuudyok sila na mag-open up kayo sa mga stakeholders. Are they saying something about this?
The reaction is be patient. The reaction is be patient. Yeah, that's the reaction. Be patient. They're getting to it. Maghintay lang. But we've been waiting. That's the reaction.
Yeah. And you talk kanina about the latest development na walang nasasampang complaints at sabi ay mag-iimbestiga pa ang NBI. Anong silbi ng investigasyon ng NBI na to? Siguro, if you compare other incidents, normal ba ganito na bigla ipapasa sa NBI? If kunyari isang issue na na-involve ngayon DOJ, hindi siya parang small investigation lang, normal ba yung pagpasa-pasahan nila?
Alright. So siguro, linawin lang natin na there have been complaints filed, even charges have been filed regarding deaths in the drug war. Pero none that was a result of the drug war review panel. Yung sinasabi yung ano bang kwenta ng NBI, actually malaki yung kwenta ng NBI, pero protracted lang in this aspect. So this is how investigations usually work. Police or NBI do the initial investigation. Either police or the NBI file the complaint before the prosecutors, and then the prosecutors file the charges in court. Nung ginawa ng DOJ yung review panel nila, syempre ang expectation mo doon, this is a special review panel.
Yeah.
It's made up of the NBI, the PNP is also a member of the panel, prosecutors are member of the panel, the Presidential Human Rights Committee are members of the panel. So you would think that this is a special panel, that kung may findings sila, dapat nga sabi ng ibang lawyer, direkta na dapat yan sa
Yeah.
korte yung charges. I'm not even expecting a direct filing of charges in court. I'm just expecting direktang complaint sa prosecutor. Kasi tinignan nyo na yung tinignan nyo na yung mga dokumento. The reason why it's being called superfluous or protracted is binalik sa very first level of investigation. When, in reality, ideally, dapat the review panel is already the first and even a special first level of investigation. So to bring it back to the NBI, the first level of a usual course of investigation, seems a little bit dragging and, to use the word of CHR, superfluous.
Yeah, parang you'd think na they have this special panel. Alam mo tayo, ang dami-daming special task force ng DOJ ng government na to. Na you'd think, yung mga barriers usually sa bureaucracy, sa mga napakatagal na process, kung may special panel ka, dapat wala na yung mga bureaucracy na parang kailangan pang i-request ng ganito, request ng ganyan. Parang rekta dapat sila. Kasi mismong representative of this government or of these government agencies, yung nag-uusap-usap sa panel na to, dapat isa yung parang goal nila, isa yung kung saan yung path na pupuntahan nila. Pero parang it seems nga, as you said, protracted, superfluous, parang ang dami pa layers tuloy na bureaucracy na dapat wala na. Pero Lian, you've been closely following yung question justice ng victims. Nakapag-cover ka na ng mga nagka-file ng cases. On the other hand, sinusundan mo rin itong drug war panel. Enough ba itong ginagawa so far ng DOJ panel? Kasi of course, we know na anyone policeman held accountable is okay siya kasi it means one family getting justice. Pero in the bigger scheme of things, is this enough?
Alam mo, Jodesz, I have yet to meet a family or a lawyer that has been engaged by the DOJ drug war panel. Lahat ng mga na-cover kong na-file na sa prosecutor or na-file na sa korte is it's an altogether separate investigation. Itong drug war panel, I have yet to meet a family or a lawyer na sinabing na-engage na, which is weird because previously I asked, is there a hotline or an email that, kasi sabi nila parang, alam mo, ang mahirap dito sa investigasyon namin, we need the willingness and cooperation of witness and maybe that
So seems na si Lian. So i-recap na natin
to
mga
get in
nangyayari.
touch. What line do I call? Sabi nila, wala kaming hotline, kami ang lalapit sa mga pamilya. But I have yet to meet. Pero syempre, not because I have yet to meet doesn't mean that there's none, no? Pero yun yung isa sa mga parang confusing part of it kasi hindi mo alam kung sino ba tong mga taong to. And actually, CHR is really interested to know sino ba tong mga involved sa mga kasong to. And just by the sheer math of it, 52 out of 6,000 or 7,000, whichever it is, it's a very little drop in the bucket. So, syempre, one case is already one more, parang one more than nothing, diba? Pero could you really call 52 out of 6,000 enough? Is it robust justice? And even then, hindi mo nga alam kung makakaabot siya sa piskal kasi nasa NBI pa lang.
May point ako dyan na gustong parang explore mamaya sa program na to. Pero for my next question, Lian, I remember nung mga panahon na hinahanap natin yung drug war report, siguro months, di ba may deadline nga sila ng December nung una, and then hindi siya nasunod or hindi na ipalabas. Sinasabi nila ay dahil sa pandemya, kulang ng resources. Of course, no one really expected the pandemic, no? But we know na maaga pa lang into the presidency, sabi mo kanina, ang taas na ng mga patayan. And obviously, it will take a lot of resources kung ganun karami yung gusto nilang investigahan eh. What did they miss out sa fail nila sa pag-start na maaga sa pag-imbestiga? Ano yung parang
Denial.
Sorry.
Denial. It's really denial, Jodesz. Kasi in the first 2 to 3 years of the drug war, that they denied that there were extrajudicial killings. For so long, they said that we should practice presumption of regularity. For so long, they said pagtiwalaan natin ng pulis. Pag sinabi ng pulis na tinutukan sila ng suspect, let's believe them. For so long, that's the line. And then suddenly in June 2020, shattered ang presumption of regularity. The DOJ said, okay, we're gonna take a second look at it. So the reason why, I don't want to say failure, I don't want to preempt the result. The reason why it's taking this long, kasi alam mo, Jodesz, ang kaso pag naging cold, and parang 1 year of staleness, of 1 year of case being cold, it has a significant impact on your case kasi witnesses could be killed. Witnesses could be harassed or threatened. Witnesses could go into hiding. Alam mo yun, tapos momentum is not there. The policeman who is involved in the killing may have been promoted or may have been transferred to be shielded from scrutiny. So, hindi nga natin alam kung yung 52 ba to, galing ba to sa 2018, 2017, 2019, we don't even know. So, the long time that they sat on these cases, denying that there were EJ case, claiming that policemen need to be believed with blind faith, this is what killed. Or, okay, fine, not killed to be fair. This is what brought this review under such dark clouds of doubt. Parang, they did it to themselves. Kasi, if they were really serious, they should have started this a long, long time ago.
And balik tayo dun sa part na, if I remember correctly, when we repeatedly asked the copies of the report, sinabi lagi ng DOJ na this is a confidential memo to the president. We need approval of the president. Parang seems to me na they're operating in a very secretive sabi mo walang transparency, na parang yung reports na ginagawa nila ay in the service of the president, the executive. Parang, I don't know, is it counterproductive na ganun yung ginagawa nila? Kasi we know that the president is the main person behind the killings. Ano yung disadvantage or posibleng mangyari kung ganito yung sistema nila na sinasabi nila lagi na confidential memo to the president, yung reports nila?
Okay, Jodesz, una, can you confirm that you can hear me well? Sorry sa mga
it's parang merong something sa ano, pero may something pa rin, pero ayun,
okay.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead. Siguro okay, wait lang sorry sa mga nanonood para
so as Lian tries to fix her voice or internet. So balikan natin yung mga sinasabi ni Lian, no. Una, sinasabi niya na in the beginning pa lang ay nakikita natin yung red flags sa investigation ng DOJ. Una-una ay walang transparency, and we know na we've been asking not even reports but even some details or information about the investigation. For example, ilan talaga yung total number na iniimbestigahan? Ano-ano mga cases yung mga iniimbestigahan ng panel na to? Kasi, of course, kailangan malaman kasi we need to find the circumstances as sinasabi nga ng CHR. And then, lately, ito nga na lumabas na yung 2 reports nilabas nila yung findings sila, pero wala pa rin yung full report. At sinasabi nila na it's a confidential memo to the president only. So I was asking Lian kanina kung ano yung disadvantage or posibleng mangyari if ganito yung sistema na meron sila, na tipong yung mga reports sila, if parang letters to the president. Kung meron talk to the nation ng president, pero meron letters to the president ang DOJ panel. So Lian, ano yung disadvantage sa ganito?
Okay. Ayan, okay na ba yung audio ko?
Parang may problema talaga sa audio mo, Lian. Pero I guess I'd have to give a more recap pa, no? I-set natin yung context ng nangyayari ngayon. Una, ang context na meron tayo ngayon ay kalalabas lang ng second report na sinasabi ay magkakaroon ng merong possible liability, pero iimbestigahan pa ng may isa pang investigation na gagawin ng government tungkol sa nakikita nilang nakikita nilang situation. Pangalawa is kakalabas lang nung decision ng ICC Pre-Trial Chamber na mag-iimbestiga sila, na-approve na nila yung authority to seek investigation ng prosecutor nila, at they will engage. Una, sinasabi nila sinasabi ng government na hindi nila hahayaan na mag-imbestiga or hindi sila makipag-cooperate. But as many human rights organizations, as many experts has been saying na kaya nilang mag-imbestiga at hindi nila kailangan ng cooperation ng government. Even the CHR said last 2 weeks ago na kaya nila na hindi naman kailangan ng cooperation with, for example, the CHR. They will wait for whatever the ICC will tell them kung mag-reach out sila. Pero sabi nga ni the late Chechito Gascon na the ICC can do it on its own and they can do whatever they need to do to conduct their investigation, and they don't necessarily need to get the heads up or to get the approval of the government that they are investigating. So
Okay, Jodesz. Okay na ba?
Yan. Yes,
Okay.
yan.
Sorry to the
Siya.
viewers and listener. Ang hirap ng work from home.
Yan,
Okay.
yan yung camera mo.
Anong camera ko? Okay. Okay na?
I think you're still in black.
I can see myself. Hello?
Yeah, so yes, game, yun nga Lian. I think you can...
Okay lang daw. According to the producer, nakikita ko. So yes, the lack of transparency goes both ways, Jodesz. If they're gonna keep it secretive, it protects them from the larger scheme of accountability. Because if they're gonna go all out, there's a risk na maraming masisilip. So, marami sigurong tatamaan or masisilip yung policy. And we know that the ICC now really has its eye on it. Kasi meron ng accusation yung prosecutor ng ICC that this seems to have been a policy of the government to kill and cover up for the killing. So, if they're gonna be totally out in the open about it, there's a higher risk na mas marami pang masisilip kaysa sa nasilip na. But if they're gonna be secretive about it, it also fuels doubts from the international community, including the ICC, and even the public, that whose votes they will be courting in 2022. Kasi wala naman talagang gusto na tinataguan ka ng impormasyon, di ba? So, it goes both ways. Siguro, the game plan is to keep it as vague as possible to still maintain the the trappings that it's regular. Parang ganon. Still maintain the trappings that it's regular, and any violation is not a policy but just, the usual rotten apples. Kasi pag binuksan mo yan lahat, policy talaga yon. Imagine if you open the case folders of 6,000 to 7,000 and then you find 5,000, isa lang yun nangyayari. That's really a policy. But if you open 50, and even if they're all indicted, you say, we have 50 rotten apples in a batch of 10,000. That's not a policy. So non-transparency works for them in that instance. Pero in the bigger picture, is that really what justice is all about?
Yeah. And I will ask you later kung yun nga kung tungkol sa ano ba talagang aim talaga ng panel na to with the context that we are in, no? Pero for my next question, Ian, siguro if you were part of the DOJ panel, and you have these reports, you have this reports with information of what you've discovered, regardless kung konti pa yung data, how should they treat these reports? You as a media, ano yung parang expect mo na gawin nila?
Alam mo, naiintindihan ko naman yung national security implication kung i-out in the open mo. If they really want to protect national security, which I don't believe, and which the Supreme Court does not believe, FYI. In a resolution in April 2018, the Supreme Court said these do not constitute national security. But sige, let's, for the sake of argument, it really concerns national security. They can redact, diba? For the sake of the public, they can redact some details, some names. Even yung report ni Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda was redacted, diba? Just to take out things that could endanger someone's life. They can redact. At least we can see what's your basis for saying this. Diba? Parang lahat naman ng study, lahat ng examination, it needs to be open to scrutiny. We need to be able to scrutinize the methodology, the baseline data, kung ilan lang, diba? Kaya nga, you would appreciate talaga yung mga report ng mga NGO. Like, for example, Ideals. I cover Ideals, isang alternative law group. They came out with a report that says, it states it is state-sanctioned murder. Pero inaamin nila na they only have 300 cases to review. And they completely and honestly say, ito lang kasi yung kaya naming kunin dahil ang hirap-hirap kumuha ng data. And that's fine. That's what we're working with. But for the government kasi, hindi nila pwedeng sabihin, ay, 300 lang kasi yung pwede naming makuhang data.
Yeah.
Bakit? Gobyerno kayo. Kasi even the vigilante killings, di ba, Jodesz? Kahit sabihin natin they haven't named a suspect, there has to be data. There has to be report because when a body drops dead on the street, police needs to come to the scene and write a report, diba? And they will interview witnesses, they will interview families. May ano yan, may documentation dyan. So the government cannot say, oh, sobrang limited ng data namin, 300 lang.
Unless they did it properly document, like what we found out in our investigation using the drug war documents that they submitted to the SC. Yeah,
precisely. Yun ang nakita natin sa Supreme Court. Sobrang kulang ng documentation, redundant documentation, rubbish documentation. So, the two speculation would be, may tinatago kayong document. Second, you did not document at all, which either way, it's a violation of protocol.
Yeah. And I think, I know I didn't give you this question, pero is there a similar incident na a panel was made to investigate something and then the report was made confidential or were not fully released to the public? Is this normal na? Or sa other instances ba ay they investigate and then they release the reports, their findings?
Meron namang ganun talaga. Kasi kapag memo to the president, remember nag-memo ang DOJ ng constitutionality ng anti-terror law before the president signed it into law. It's really some documents are really executive privilege because that would maintain candor on the part of the person writing the memo. Kasi if you know that it will be released to the public, baka you can't be completely honest and candid in the report. So, may mga memo talaga to the president that is executive privilege. However, in my personal opinion, the drug war is the campaign of the president. 20,000 people have died. It is under an investigation by the International Criminal Court. They are asking for people's votes in 2022. I don't think this is privileged information. I think we have come to the point that Filipinos deserve to know what happened. Kahit na, okay, hindi na lang Pilipino not just you and I. Families, di ba? Kung namatayan ka ng anak mo, ng tatay mo, ng nanay mo, the least aspect of justice that you deserve is to know what happened. Parang see a semblance of transparency. Pero yung, grabe, wala ka nang suspect, walang indictment, tapos pinagtataguan ka pa ng report, hindi mo alam kung kasama ka sa 52, kung kasama yung kamag-anak mo sa 52. Parang grabe namang kawalan ng hustisya yun.
Yeah. And next question ko, favorite ko sa mga questions ko for today. The ICC Pretrial Chamber nga said na it appears na killing is state policy in the Philippines. And the head of state is President Duterte. Siya yung nagbibigay ng conduct kung ano yung mga dapat gawin, di ba, in the government. But it seems that the DOJ investigation is at the mercy of his whims nga, di ba? Kasi nga, ang context ito ay confidential memo, ang report sa kanya, kailangan may approval niya bawat galaw. Kasi nga, of course, it's an executive body. Ang DOJ ay part ng executive. Given this context, hindi ba possible na piecemeal lang yung justice na may ibibigay? Lalo na yung mga may pakana ng drug war sa Duterte. Parang ano ba talaga yung, as may question said kanina, para saan ba talaga tong DOJ panel? Hindi, para ba to sa mga libo-libong biktima or para lang to masabi na may ginagawa sila? Kasi ang pinupunto ng mga human rights groups, kaya gusto nang imbestigahan ng mapatayan, ay ipakita ang system-wide ito, ipakita na there is a grand mechanism behind this drug war killings. And nakita natin na hindi pa tinatapos, hindi pa tinitigil ang drug war, patuloy pa rin siya. Marami pang pulis ang hindi na sususpend. At eventually, si Duterte hindi pa sinasabi na, hindi pa ina-admit, hindi pa na-acknowledge na may mali siyang ginawa sa drug war na to. So, in a bigger scheme, ano ba silbi ng panel na to talaga?
Alam mo, in an ideal world, if they did it right, this review panel could have been a very significant part of accountability, whether or not it will indict the Duterte government. Kasi it was such a good promise. Diba? Parang hindi naman natin pwedeng i-dismiss or i-undermine an effort of an executive agency such as the DOJ. Parang sige, ibibigay natin, nangako kayo that you will review. But the thing is, those promises do not seem to be bearing fruit. Kasi ang tagal. Sobrang tagal, diba? Parang may continuous trial na rule, diba? Parang within 6 months, dapat ang isang drug case tapos na sa trial. Yet, the investigation, not even prosecution, first level of investigation is taking this long. Hindi lang posibleng piecemeal. Definitely piecemeal. Math pa lang, Jodesz, 52 out of 6,000 or 7,000. That's piecemeal. Tapos yung incremental information, that's piecemeal, and the very slow and protracted process, that is also very piecemeal. Pero alam mo, siguro may bias din ako towards prosecutors because I cover them, no? Parang naniniwala ako to some extent that there are really good people in government who want to see justice. But hindi mo pwedeng ibase sa belief mo sa sistema yung defense. Parang hindi mo pwedeng ibase lang all on your belief on some people in the government. You need to base it on the results that you're seeing. And the reality is, there is no result that we're seeing. So, diba, as much as it pains us all to admit that, mukhang walang siya. Ito yung nakikita natin It's what's right in front of our faces.
Yeah. So, for you, ano dapat yung key priorities ng drug war panel ngayon? Ano yung gusto mo makita nilang gawin in the next week? Or even days, kasi we know na medyo time of the essence itong investigation na to, lalo na mag-election na. Ano dapat nilang priority ngayon?
Number 1, open it to the CHR. Yun, kasi makakatulong talaga yung CHR sa transparency, even the expediting of the investigation. Kasi, di ba, CHR knows what to do. But, di ba, aside from that, bukod sa i-open nila sa CHR, they really need to fast-track the investigation. And at the very least, if they can't fast-track the investigation, at least be completely honest. Kasi I think at this point, di ba, Jodesz, nakakausap nga tayo ng mga relative ng mga namatayan, lalo na yung mga pinatay ng vigilante. Halos, alam mo, they have such a sorrowful resolve na hindi na ma-solve ever yung kanilang pagkamatay ng kanilang mahal sa buhay kasi wala silang suspect Kasi riding in tandem, pinatay, tumakbo, wala silang suspect. So, parang tinanggap na lang nilang walang mangyayari. The least you can offer that grieving wife or that grieving child is honesty. Hindi yung papaasahin ka na may ginagawa kami, but really there's nothing being done. So, di ba, parang if Filipino people or the families of these victims cannot know the truth because we have no documentation, we let it pass, we let it get cold, at least be honest to them because that's what a good government does.
Yeah. And for my last question, what's the worst case scenario na isip mo na mangyayari if babagal-bagal pa rin sila itong panel na to?
You know, I think, Jodesz, yung mga victims or at least the people that we've talked to do not really have, hindi na sila umaasa sa domestic. Hindi na sila umaasa sa domestic system, which is why, according to the representation report of the ICC, victims favor an ICC investigation because for them, it's a more reputable process. It's a process that offers more likelihood of justice. Kung hindi man reparation, at least honesty, truth, and getting their stories told. In an international level, in a national level, yung hindi i-deny na pinatay yung kamag-anak nila, hindi i-deny na may nangyaring masama, hindi i-regard yung mga drug addicts or drug suspects as not part of humanity, as Secretary Aguirre once put it. So I think the victims, or at least the people we talk to, they've completely dismissed the DOJ review panel. So the worst case scenario for them for this panel is over. Hindi na sila naniniwala. But, of course, diba, again, sabi ko nga, I always have a bias for the justice system. I would want to see it work. I think lahat ng Pilipino needs to needs to have hindi naman hope, pero we all should want the domestic justice system to work.
Yeah.
So 'di ba? Gusto natin yung mangyari. So ako parang they have before the elections kasi when we change presidents, that's another discussion and conversation altogether. But they have how many months? Parang less than a year to go, and it would be the legacy of Secretary Guevara also, who enjoys by and large a good reputation in the legal community, 'di ba? Pati yung mga opposition nire-respeto siya. So yung legacy niya nandito din eh. So I guess what I'm wishing for is for the prosecutors of the DOJ. Kasi the DOJ takes pride that na-rebrand nila yung sarili nila. Yeah. DOJ takes pride that again parang that they restored respect to the institution. Well, that's debatable, depends who you ask. But they take pride in that. So para sa akin, ito na, this is the stretch down the line. It's their legacies on the line. So I'm wishing and I'm hoping for a more proactive and a review that will show concrete results. And if they can't show concrete results, honestly.
What are the chances that will happen?
Mahirap. Siguro, na lang, sasagutin ko na lang siya ng challenge. Kung nanonood man sila ngayon. I'm sure that they would want to to finish their terms on a good note and keep true to their word that respect is once again restored to the great institution that is the Department of Justice. So, challenge is up to them.
Yeah, that's a good parting word, Lian, no? Na it's a call to action, but not to the public, but to the judiciary, to Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara, na I'm sure will get hold of this interview, will know what you said in this 45-minute interview. So, abangan natin kung ano yung next steps nila, no? And so yun, maraming salamat, Lian, for joining me today and for explaining to us yung mga nangyayari ngayon sa drug war panel. Kasi ang daming kasi election season na, ang daming nangyayari, madaming noise, madaming election noise. And we didn't want naman na matakpan or masapawan itong investigasyon ng drug war panel. So, next time na may updates, I will invite you again and I'll see you again. And I hope you answer more questions from us.
Sana meron na tayong more answers to offer.
Please.
Thank you, Jodesz, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
Yes. And for our viewers, if you want to take part in our discussions outside of this episode, you can join our Facebook groups. If you want to talk about elections, you can join Facebook PH Vote. You can check the link in our screen. And then if you want a general Facebook group that we can talk anything about the Philippines, about the issues that plague the nation, or even global issues, you can join the Rappler room. So you can send their story ideas or comments about our stories or comments about our situation in general. So if you want naman exclusive content and events, pwede kang sumali sa Rappler Plus. Hanapin nyo na lang yun. And then yung link sa screen natin. And of course, we can't do this this episode without you. If you want to support Rappler journalism, please donate to our fund, and then sa screen yung link natin. And kung gusto niyo sundan ng issue na to, huwag kalimutan na i-follow ang Rappler sa Facebook, sa Twitter, sa YouTube, at sa lahat ng social media. Kung hindi niyo pa nagagawa, pati na rin ang Newsbreak, huwag kalimutan din na follow ang Newsbreak, ang investigative arm ng Rappler. Sa Facebook rin kami, sa Twitter, at sa YouTube din. Samahan niyo ulit kami next week para sa bagong episode ng show na to kung saan tinatalakay natin ang mga may init na issue sa bansa. Ako si Jodesz Gavilan and this is Newsbreak, Beyond the Stories.